You have nobody. Ryan Cole leaned across the counter, close enough that Claire could smell the cigarette smoke on his breath. Close enough that she could see the smirk carved into his face like he'd practiced it 1,000 times before. She didn't flinch, she didn't cry. She picked up the coffee pot, set it down slow and steady, and looked him dead in the eyes. My boss will know what happened here. Ryan laughed. His two men laughed with him. None of them knew they had just made the last mistake of their criminal careers. If this story moves you, subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's go back to the beginning, because nothing about this night was simple. The Silver Ridge Diner sat 23 miles outside of Elko, Nevada, on a stretch of highway that most people only notice when they were running low on gas or too tired to keep driving. It was the kind of place that existed between places, not a destination, just a pause. The neon sign out front flickered on the word open like it was having second thoughts. The parking lot was cracked asphalt with yellow lines that had faded down to ghosts. 2 of the 4 booths by the window had duct tape patching the vinyl. The coffee was always hot, the pie was always real, and William Carter always made sure the lights stayed on no matter how slow the week had been. But none of that is where this story really starts. This story starts with Claire Morgan, 26 years old, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail that never quite stayed in place during a long shift, wearing a pale blue uniform that had been washed so many times the color had softened into something closer to gray. She had been working the late shift at Silver Ridge for 2 years. She knew every regular by name. She knew that Earl Dawson took his coffee black with 2 sugars, even though he always said he didn't take sugar. She knew that Mildred Cho always asked for the soup, but always ended up ordering the grilled cheese. She knew that truckers who pulled in after midnight usually just wanted someone to talk to more than they wanted the food. Claire had that gift, the ability to make strangers feel like they'd walked into somewhere that remembered them. It was a Tuesday night in late October when everything changed. The diner was quiet. There was one trucker at the counter, a man named Hector, who drove a refrigerated rig up from Las Vegas 3 times a week and always tipped $5 no matter what he ordered. There was an older couple in the corner booth who had been nursing the same 2 cups of coffee for 40 minutes. Not talking much, just sitting together the way people do when they've been married long enough. That silence feels like conversation. And there was a teenage boy at the end of the counter working on a piece of apple pie and a glass of milk, probably a local kid killing time before he had to go home. Claire was refilling the coffee maker behind the counter when she heard the door. Not a knock, not a bell, just the door swinging open hard, like whoever was coming through it didn't feel the need to be polite about entering a place. 3 men walked in. The one in front was Ryan Cole. If you had passed him on the street, you might have noticed him, not because he was physically imposing, though he was broad-shouldered and moved with the deliberate slowness of someone who had learned that taking up space made people uncomfortable. No, you would have noticed Ryan Cole because of his eyes. They were the kind of eyes that were always calculating, always measuring, always looking for the angle. He was 34 years old, wore a dark jacket over a gray shirt, and had the hands of someone who had used them for things that didn't appear on any legal document. Behind him came 2 men who moved the way trained dogs move. Always slightly behind the leader, always watching, always ready. One of them was Tommy Briggs, Ryan's cousin, who had a scar along his jawline from a bar fight 3 years ago, and who was known around Elko for having a temper that ran about 6 seconds ahead of his brain. The other was a man people only ever called Dex. Nobody knew his last name. Nobody asked. Claire looked up when they came in. She had seen trouble walk through a diner door before. It had a specific energy, something tight and purposeful that was different from hunger or tiredness. She felt it immediately. Evening, she said, keeping her voice steady and professional. You all want a table or... We're not here to eat, Ryan said. I didn't sit down. He walked straight to the counter and put both hands flat on the surface, leaning forward just enough to make the gesture feel like a statement. Behind him, Tommy moved to stand near the door. Dex drifted to the side, positioning himself between the couple in the corner booth and the exit in a way that was so casual it looked accidental and so deliberate it was not. Hector the trucker set down his coffee cup and went very still. The teenage boy stopped chewing. The older couple looked at each other. Where's Carter? Ryan asked. Mr. Carter isn't here right now, Claire said. Is there something I can help you with? Ryan smiled. It was not a warm smile. Yeah, actually there is. See, me and my associates, we provide a service to the businesses along this highway. Protection, making sure things run smooth, making sure nobody has any problems they can't handle on their own. Claire had heard the word before. Protection. She knew exactly what it meant and exactly what it didn't mean. She kept her hands flat on the counter. She kept her face neutral. But inside, something that had been nervous shifted into something that was very, very focused. I'll let Mr. Carter know you came by, she said. I think, Ryan said, his voice dropping just slightly, that you and me should have a conversation about this now, because William Carter needs to understand that this isn't optional. And I think a smart young woman like you can help him understand that. I'm just the waitress, Claire said. Right, Ryan said. And right now, you're the one standing in front of me. He reached across the counter and picked up the coffee pot. Not aggressively, just casually, the way someone picks up something that belongs to them, and set it on the other side between him and Claire, like he was rearranging the space to suit himself. That small gesture sent a chill through the room. Hector shifted on his stool. Tommy, by the door, noticed the movement and turned his head. Easy, cowboy, Tommy said, and his voice was not loud, but it carried. Hector went still again. Ryan kept his eyes on Claire. We've been real patient with Mr. Carter, he said. We've come by twice now. Left messages. He hasn't responded, which tells me either he doesn't take this seriously or he thinks he can ignore us and nothing's going to happen. He paused. Nothing's going to happen to him. We're reasonable people. But this diner, equipment breaks down. Inspectors show up. Word gets around that the food isn't safe. Business dries up. You understand what I'm saying? Claire understood exactly what he was saying. She was 26 years old, and she had not had an easy life, and she had learned a long time ago that the people who tried to intimidate you were always counting on you to be more afraid of them than you were of what it would cost you to stand up. They were always betting on your fear being bigger than your backbone. She looked at Ryan Cole. She thought about William Carter. She thought about what this diner was and what it meant and who it kept alive. Not just her, but the regulars, the truckers, the travelers who needed somewhere safe to stop in the middle of nowhere. She said quietly and without blinking, "My boss will know what happened here." Ryan stared at her. There was a beat, 1 second, maybe 2, where something flickered behind his eyes, not quite uncertainty, more like he was recalculating. Then he smiled again and stepped back from the counter. "Yeah," he said, "you tell him." He looked around the diner slowly, letting his gaze move across every face. "You all tell him." And then the three of them walked out. The door swung shut. Nobody moved for 5 full seconds. Then the teenage boy at the counter said, in a voice that was barely a whisper, "Who were those guys?" Hector picked up his coffee cup with a hand that was not entirely steady. He looked at Claire. She was already reaching for the phone behind the counter. "You okay?" Hector asked. "I'm fine," Claire said, but her hand was shaking. She dialed William Carter's number and listened to it ring 4 times before he picked up, his voice rough with sleep because it was nearly 11 at night, and William Carter was 61 years old and went to bed early. "Claire," he said, "what's wrong?" She told him everything, every word Ryan Cole had said, the way they'd moved, the way Tommy had positioned himself near the door, the way Dex had made sure nobody in the diner could get past him without it being a decision. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, not the silence of a man who didn't know what to do. The silence of a man who had known this moment might come and had been hoping for a long time that it wouldn't. "Are you safe?" William asked. "Is everyone there safe?" "Yes," Claire said. "They left. They didn't touch anyone. But William, they're going to come back." "I know," he said. "What do we do?" Another pause. "Go home tonight, Claire. Lock up early if you need to. I'll be there in the morning." "William, I'll be there," he said. "I promise." She believed him. She didn't know why exactly. She didn't know what it was about William Carter that made you believe him when he said things like that. He was not physically large. He was not loud. He was a quiet man who made good coffee and kept a clean diner and always remembered to ask about your family. But when he spoke with that particular tone, calm, steady, final, it landed in you somewhere that logic couldn't quite reach. She locked the diner at 11:15. Hector walked her to her car without being asked. The older couple thanked her quietly and left. The teenage boy had already gone. The highway was empty and dark and stretched out in both directions like a question nobody had answered yet. Claire sat in her car for a moment before starting the engine. She thought about Ryan Cole's smile. She thought about what it meant to be someone nobody was afraid of. She thought about being 26 and working a diner on a highway in Nevada and having nothing behind her except work and family and a whole list of things that hadn't gone right yet. Then she started the car and drove home. William Carter showed up at the diner at 6 the next morning, which was an hour earlier than usual. Claire was already there. She had not slept well. William came in through the back door, the way he always did, and went straight to the coffee maker. I was a lean man with gray at his temples and hands that were calloused in ways that a life of only cafe work wouldn't explain. He moved with an economy of motion that some people might have called quiet and others would have recognized as something more practiced than that. He had a small scar above his left eyebrow that he never talked about, and his eyes were very still in a way that was unusual. Most people's eyes moved around when they were thinking, but William's went still, like he was listening to something nobody else could hear. He poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of Claire without asking. She wrapped both hands around it and waited. "Tell me again," he said. "All of it, from the beginning." She told him again. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands and looked at the surface of the counter. "His name is Ryan Cole," William said. It was not a question. "He said it himself," Claire confirmed. "I know who he is," William said. She looked at him. "You do?" "He's been working this stretch of highway for about 8 months. Started with the gas station out by exit 14, then the truck stop. Now he's working his way through the smaller businesses." William paused. "He's not the smartest man on the highway, but he's smart enough to pick targets he thinks can't fight back." "William," Claire said carefully, "should we call the police?" I was quiet for a moment. The police had been told about Ryan Cole before, by the gas station owner, by the couple who runs the produce stand out near mile marker 40. Nothing came of it. Ryan's careful. He doesn't put anything in writing. Everything is verbal, everything is vague, everything is technically just a conversation. He looked up at her. That's the design. Claire felt something settle in her chest. Not defeat exactly, but the weight of a problem that didn't have an easy door. "So what do we do?" she asked again. Same question as last night. She needed a different answer this time. William looked at her for a long moment. There was something in his face that she couldn't quite read. Not quite reluctance, not quite sadness. Something more layered than either. "We keep the diner open," he said. "We keep doing exactly what we do. And I'm going to make some calls." "What kind of calls?" He picked up his coffee cup. "The kind I haven't made in a very long time." Ryan Cole came back 3 days later. This time he came during the lunch hour, which Claire realized afterward was deliberate. More customers meant more witnesses, which meant more people who would see what happened when someone decided not to cooperate. It was a performance as much as a threat. He brought 4 men this time. He walked in, sat himself down at the counter like he was a regular, and when Claire came over, he smiled at her like they were old friends. "Coffee," he said. She poured it. He watched her pour it. "William around?" "No," she said. "Funny how he's never around when I come by." He wrapped his hands around the cup. "Almost like he's avoiding me. You think he's avoiding me, Claire?" She had not told him her name. He had found it out. That meant he had spent time and effort learning it, which meant he had spent time and effort on this diner specifically, which meant this was not casual. She kept her face even. "I don't know what Mr. Carter's schedule is." "Sure you don't." He took a sip. "You make good coffee. You know that? This is genuinely good coffee. It would be a real shame if something happened to a place that makes coffee this good." One of his men, not Tommy this time, someone she hadn't seen before, was moving slowly along the far wall, running his hand along the surface like he was appraising property. He paused near the breaker box mounted on the wall. He didn't touch it. He just stood near it. "Ryan," she said, and she used his first name on purpose because she wanted him to know she was not afraid to look directly at him. "I think you should finish your coffee and leave." He tilted his head. "Is that right?" "Yes. And if I don't, then I'm going to ask you to leave." He laughed, not cruel exactly, more like genuinely amused. He turned and looked at the other customers, 4 of them, all of whom were very carefully not looking at the counter. He turned back to Claire. "You got spine, I'll give you that," he said. "Most people, when I sit down and talk to them, they get real polite real fast. You stay steady. I respect that." He set the coffee cup down. "But here's the thing, Claire. Spine doesn't pay bills. Spine doesn't fix a burst pipe. Spine doesn't stop the health inspector from finding violations that weren't there before. You understand?" She understood. "William Carter has until Friday," Ryan said. He stood, pulled a 20 from his pocket, and set it on the counter with a precision that made the gesture feel obscene. "That's a fair tip for good coffee." He turned and walked out. His men followed him. Claire picked up the $20 bill and stared at it. Then she walked to the back of the diner, pushed through the kitchen door, stood at the sink, and gripped the edge of the metal basin with both hands. She breathed in. She breathed out. She stared at the wall. She was shaking again, not from fear this time, or not only from fear. She was shaking because she was furious. She had grown up watching people like Ryan Cole take things from people who had less than they did and wrap it in language that made the taking sound almost reasonable. She had watched people bend and break and give up the things they'd built because the cost of fighting back seemed too high. She had watched her own mother work 3 jobs and still have people look at her like she was somehow failing. She had spent her entire adult life trying to be the person who did not bend. And here was this man sitting at this counter, leaving a $20 tip like he was leaving a price tag on something he had already decided was his. When William Carter arrived that afternoon, she met him at the door. "He came back," she said. "I know," William said. "I watched from across the highway." She stopped. "You were there?" "I needed to see how he operates in person," William said simply. "Not just hear about it, see it." And William looked past her, through the window, at the highway outside. His eyes had gone to that still place again. "And I understand now what this is," he said. "This isn't about money. Not really. It's about control. He needs us to cooperate because if we don't, his whole system breaks down. One business that won't pay is a message to every other business." "So he won't stop," Claire said. "No," William said. "He won't stop." She watched his face. "William, those calls you mentioned, did you make them?" A long, long pause. "I made one," he said finally. "And?" He looked at her. Something shifted in his expression, something old and complicated and carrying a weight she couldn't measure. And the answer came back in about 30 seconds. She waited. He said very quietly, "I need you to trust me, Claire. What happens next? I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing and I know what I'm not doing." She looked at him for a long moment, at the scar above his eyebrow, at the stillness in his eyes, at his calloused hands, at this man who had given her a job when she had almost given up on finding one, who had never once talked down to her, who had built a small, quiet thing in the middle of nowhere and kept it alive through will and stubbornness and genuine care. "I trust you," she said. And she meant it. She just didn't know yet how large the answer to that phone call was going to be. The next week and a half was a kind of low-grade siege. Ryan Cole never came back in person, but his presence was everywhere. On Wednesday, 2 of the cafe's regulars didn't come in, a pair of retired ranchers who had eaten breakfast there every morning for years. Claire found out later someone had told them the diner was having problems, and they should probably eat somewhere else for a while. On Thursday, the compressor on the industrial refrigerator started making a sound it had never made before. Not quite broken, not quite fine, just wrong enough to require $300 in a service code to diagnose. On Friday, 3 men in a dark pickup drove slowly through the parking lot twice during the dinner hour without stopping. They didn't come in, they just drove through, slowly, looking. It was the kind of harassment designed to make you feel surrounded without ever actually touching you. It was very effective. The other waitress who worked the morning shift, a woman named Sandra who had 2 kids in middle school and drove 40 minutes each way to work at Silver Ridge, came to Claire on Friday afternoon with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm thinking about taking some time off," Sandra said. "Just my kids, I just can't have anything happen." "I understand," Claire said immediately. "Take the time. No judgment." Sandra grabbed her hand. I'm sorry, I know that leaves you. Sandra, go home. Be with your kids. I've got this. After Sandra left, Claire sat alone in the diner for a few minutes in the mid-afternoon quiet. She counted the customers who had come in over the past 3 days. She compared it to the week before. The drop was not catastrophic. Not yet. But she could see the trajectory. She could see where the line was heading if nothing changed. She thought about Friday's deadline, the one Ryan Cole had mentioned. Today was Friday. He hadn't come back. She wasn't sure if that was good or terrifying. She was still sitting there thinking when the bell above the door rang and William walked in. He had not been at the diner much this week. He had come in each morning to open, but he had been gone by 9 and he would return for a few hours in the evening, and he was always on his phone, and whatever conversations he was having them outside, away from the diner, standing in the parking lot with his back to the building and his voice too low to carry. He came in now, poured himself coffee, sat across from Claire in the corner booth, and looked at her. "Tell me how you're doing," he said. "I'm fine," she said automatically. He waited. She sighed. "I'm tired. I'm angry. Sandra took time off. The regulars are scared away. The refrigerator is going to cost me my whole next paycheck to fix." She paused. "But I'm not quitting." "I know you're not," he said. "William," she leaned forward, "what is happening? What are these calls you've been making? You owe me more than trust me at this point. I'm the one here every day. I'm the one they're looking at." He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, he chose his words with a care that she had noticed before, but that felt especially deliberate now. 40 years ago, he said, "I was not the man you know." She waited. "I made choices when I was young that I am not proud of," he said. "I was part of a world that operates by rules most people never see, and I left that world. I walked away completely, and I built this," he gestured, meaning the diner, meaning Silver Ridge, meaning this small, quiet thing. "Because I wanted to believe that a person could start over, that the things you'd done didn't have to be the only things that defined you." Claire said nothing. "The people I called," William continued, "are people from that world, not criminals, not people you need to fear, but people who understand certain things about power and protection that most people don't. And when I called, they asked me one question." "What question?" Claire asked. William looked at her directly. "They asked if I needed them, not if I wanted them, if I needed them." He set his coffee cup down, and I said yes. For the first time in 12 years, I said yes. The diner was very quiet. "Who are they?" Claire asked. William was quiet for a long time, then he said family, so. On Saturday morning, Claire arrived at the diner at 5:45. The sky was still dark, and the highway was empty. She unlocked the front door, turned on the lights, started the coffee. She had been working for about 20 minutes when she heard a motorcycle on the highway. She looked up. It was distant, just a sound in the dark. She went back to her work. 15 minutes later, she heard another one. She looked up again, listened, went back to work. By the time William arrived at 6:30, there had been perhaps half a dozen motorcycles passing on the highway, unusual for this time of morning. But Nevada highways carried all kinds of traffic, and she hadn't thought much of it. William came in, poured his coffee, and sat at the counter. He looked out the window at the highway. His face was very calm. "How's the coffee?" Claire asked. "Perfect," he said, "like always." She looked at him. Something in his posture was different this morning. Not tense, something closer to the opposite of tense, a kind of settled quality, like a man who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has finally put it down. "William," she said, "yeah. Are things about to change?" He looked at her, those still, calm eyes. "Yes," he said simply. She nodded slowly. "Good or bad?" He thought about it for a moment. For Ryan Cole, he picked up his cup. "Bad." He drank his coffee. Outside in the distance, the sound of engines drifted on the morning air. Claire listened to them and felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been tightly compressed for more than a week beginning, slowly, to expand. She didn't know what was coming, but she had chosen to trust this quiet man and his calloused hands and his still eyes and his 12-year-old secret. And as the sun began to rise over the Nevada desert and the first light touched the cracked asphalt of the Silver Ridge parking lot, She turned back to the coffee maker and told herself the same thing she had been telling herself every morning for 2 years. One more day. You can do one more day. She just didn't know yet that this particular day was going to be unlike any day that had come before it. And that three men who believed fear was a foundation were about to discover exactly how wrong they had been. The thing about living a double life, even a former double life, is that the seams always show if you know where to look. Claire had worked for William Carter for 2 years. 2 years of 6-day weeks, of early mornings and late nights, of watching him move through the diner with that particular quietness that she had always attributed to age or temperament, or just the way some people carry themselves when they'd seen enough of the world to stop being loud about it. She had never questioned it. She had been grateful for it, even grateful for a boss who didn't shout, who didn't posture, who treated her like a person capable of thinking for herself. But standing behind that counter on Saturday morning, listening to motorcycles pass on the highway in the gray pre-dawn light, she found herself replaying 2 years of small things that had never added up. The way William sometimes stood at the front window and watched the highway, not the way a cafe owner watches for customers, but the way a man watches a perimeter. The way he never talked about his life before the diner. Not in the vague way that private people avoid personal topics, but with a specific practiced care, like someone who had learned through long discipline to keep certain doors closed. The way certain customers over the years had come in and looked at William with something that was not quite recognition and not quite surprise, but somewhere between the two, and how William always found a reason to speak with those customers privately, briefly, and how they always left without making any kind of scene. The scar above his eyebrow, the calloused hands, the stillness. She thought about all of it while she poured coffee and wiped the counter and waited for the morning to decide what it was going to be. She wasn't afraid exactly. She had moved past afraid sometime in the past week, the way you move past a milestone on a highway. You're aware of passing it, and then it's behind you and you're somewhere new. What she felt now was something more like alertness, a clarity that comes when a situation strips away everything that doesn't matter and leaves only what does. William sat at the counter and drank his coffee and occasionally looked out the window, and the two of them stayed in that easy silence they had built over 2 years until the first real customer of the morning, Earl Dawson, black coffee, 2 sugars, always said he didn't take sugar, pushed through the door at 7:15. Earl sat down, took off his hat, and looked between Claire and William with the perceptive eyes of a man who had farmed the same land for 40 years and had learned to read weather, animals, and people with equal accuracy. "Something's different this morning," he said. It was not a question. "Same diner, same coffee," Claire said, and set his cup in front of him. Earl looked at William. "You all right, William?" "I'm fine, Earl," William said. "Those men who've been coming around," Earl said carefully. He wrapped his hands around his cup. "Town's been talking." William looked at him steadily. "What's the town saying?" "Saying you got a problem," Earl paused. "Saying you might need help." "I've got help," William said. Earl looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once, the way men of a certain generation nod when they've heard an answer that tells them more than the words did. He turned back to his coffee and didn't ask any more questions. Claire watched the exchange and filed it away. By 9 o'clock, the morning rush, such as it was, Silver Ridge's morning rush was a relative term, had come and gone. Hector the trucker had come through, eaten fast, left his $5 tip, and paused at the door long enough to look at Claire and say, "You call me if you need anything. I mean that." She had thanked him and meant it. By 10, the diner was quiet again. William's phone buzzed on the counter. He looked at the screen, stood up, and walked outside. Claire watched him through the window. He stood in the parking lot with his back to the highway and spoke for about 4 minutes. She couldn't see his face. She watched his posture, the set of his shoulders, the angle of his head, the way you watch someone when you're trying to read a conversation you can't hear. When he came back in, he sat down, picked up his coffee, and said without looking at her, "They're 2 hours out." She stopped wiping the counter. "Who is?" He looked up. "The people I called." She set down the cloth. "William, talk to me, please. Just tell me who's coming." He was quiet for a moment. She had the sense that he was choosing, very deliberately, how much to say and how to say it. Not because he wanted to deceive her, but because the story was long and complicated and had pieces that mattered in ways she didn't have context for yet. "Have you ever heard of the Hells Angels?" he asked. She stared at him. "The motorcycle club," he said. "I know who they are," she said slowly. "William, are you—" "I was," he said. "For 12 years before I opened this place, I was a full-patch member. I held a position. I was respected, I suppose, is the word people would use." He paused. "I walked away in 2012, clean, completely. I gave up everything that came with it, and I came out here, and I built this." The diner felt very quiet. Claire could hear the hum of the refrigerator, fixed now but still slightly off in its rhythm, and the distant sound of a truck passing on the highway, and her own breathing. "You were in the Hells Angels," she said. "Yes. For 12 years. Yes." She sat down on the stool behind the counter. She didn't say anything for a moment. She was processing, not panicking, not recoiling, just processing. The way you process information that fundamentally reorders something you thought you understood. "Why did you leave?" she asked finally. He looked at his coffee cup. "Because I got tired," he said. "Not of the brotherhood, never of the people, but of the trajectory, of what it was becoming, of the things being asked that I wasn't sure I could keep doing and still be the person I wanted to be." He paused. "I lost someone close to me, and I stood at that grave and I made a decision." "Who?" she asked quietly. "My younger brother," he said. "Daniel. He was 29. She didn't ask how. Some questions you don't need to ask. "I'm sorry," she said. "I built a place for him," William said simply. "He always said I should open a diner. He loved diners. Said they were the most honest kind of restaurant because they didn't pretend to be anything they weren't." He looked up at her. "So now you know." "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked. "Because it didn't matter before," he said. "You didn't need to know. You just needed a job, and I needed someone I could count on." He paused. "And because I am not ashamed of my past, but I am also not defined by it. I didn't want you to look at me and see that first." She thought about that. She thought about how he had looked at her when she had come to interview for the job 2 years ago, sitting across from him in the same diner, with her resume that had more gaps in it than experience, and how he had not asked about the gaps, had not made her explain the rough years, had simply asked her if she was reliable, and if she cared about people, and if she made good coffee. And when she said yes to all three, he had said the job was hers. He had never asked her to explain her past. She had never asked him to explain his. She supposed they had both been operating on the same unspoken agreement. "The people who are coming," she said. "How many?" He looked at her steadily. "I don't know exactly. I asked Michael. He's the regional chapter leader, man I've known since I was 30 years old. I asked him to send whoever was available and willing. And he said to make sure there's enough coffee." She looked at him. He looked back at her, and then for the first time in 10 days she laughed. It came out of her unexpectedly, a short, genuine laugh that surprised her as much as anything. William's expression didn't change exactly, but something around his eyes shifted. Relief maybe, or warmth. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'll make more coffee." He nodded. "That's my girl." She turned back to the coffee maker. Behind her, William picked up his phone again. She heard him say quietly, "Yeah, we're ready." She didn't turn around. She just made the coffee. She made it strong. The 2 hours passed faster than she expected, because the morning had things in it that required her attention. A family with 3 small children came through, parents exhausted, kids wired, and she spent 20 minutes making sure the youngest got a piece of pie that she cut into the shape of something that could be interpreted as a rabbit. A woman traveling alone from San Francisco to Salt Lake City sat at the corner booth for an hour working on her laptop, and Claire refilled her coffee 4 times without being asked, and when the woman finally left, she pressed Claire's hand and said, "I needed this today, thank you." And Claire understood that she meant the diner, not just the coffee. This was what William had built. This was what they were protecting. Not just a building, not just a business, a place that held people when they needed holding. She was in the kitchen when she heard the first one motorcycle, distant, coming from the west. She came out front. William was standing at the window. Another motorcycle, closer, then 2 more, then 5. Then the sound multiplied in a way that stopped being a sound and became something else. A physical presence, a vibration that moved through the floor and the walls and settled in your chest like a second heartbeat. William walked to the front door and pushed it open. Claire stood behind him and looked over his shoulder. The highway was filling up, not with cars, not with the ordinary traffic of an ordinary morning. Motorcycles, dozens of them, big machines loud and purposeful, rolling in formation down the highway and turning, one by one and then in groups, into the cracked asphalt parking lot of the Silver Ridge Diner. She stopped counting at 35. The lot was full. They were parked along the highway's shoulder. They were still coming. William stepped out into the parking lot and stood there while the engines cut, one by one, till the silence that replaced the sound felt enormous. She heard the creak of leather, the click of kickstands, the low rumble of men talking to each other in the way men talk who have traveled long miles together. And then one man walked toward William, and William walked toward him, and they met in the middle of the parking lot and shook hands and pulled each other into the kind of embrace that belongs to people who have stood through things together that most people never face. The man who embraced William was perhaps 60, heavy-set, with white hair and a beard and a face like a relief map of difficult country. He had arms like dock rope and eyes that were, despite everything, startlingly kind. "Stone," William said. "William," the man said. He stepped back and looked at his old friend with an assessment that took about 2 seconds and seemed to land on a conclusion that satisfied him. "You look like a man who makes coffee for a living." "Guilty," William said. "You look better than the last time I saw you," Stone said. It meant something. William nodded. "How many?" William asked. 73, as Stone said. "Some came from Reno. Some came from Salt Lake. Bobby Reyes drove all the way up from Phoenix." "Bobby Reyes," as William repeated. Something moved through his face. Emotion, old and real. "I haven't seen Bobby in 8 years. He said to tell you he still owes you $20, Stone said. William made a sound that was almost a laugh. Stone looked past him at the diner, at Claire standing in the doorway. He looked at her the way a person looks at someone they've heard about and formed an image of and are now measuring against the actual person. Whatever he saw seemed to confirm something. "That your waitress?" he asked. "That's Claire," William said. "She the one who stood her ground?" "She's the one." Stone looked at her for another moment, then looked back at William. "Good," he said simply. "All right, so where does this Ryan Cole think he's got you cornered?" William said, "He's coming tonight." "Then we'll be here tonight," Stone said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. As if 73 people had not just rearranged their entire weekend to drive hundreds of miles to a roadside diner on a cracked asphalt highway in the Nevada desert. Because one quiet man had finally, after 12 years, picked up a phone and said he needed help. Claire stepped back inside and leaned against the counter and breathed. Hector came in about an hour later for a second cup of coffee he hadn't planned on, took one look at the parking lot, set his cup down very carefully, and turned to Claire. "Are those?" "Yes," she said. "All of them?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm going to sit here and drink this coffee very slowly if that's all right with you." "Stay as long as you want," she said. He stayed 4 hours. The men who had arrived, and there were women among them too, she noticed, partners and full members both, were not what she had expected. She wasn't sure, looking back, what she had expected. Something more theatrical, perhaps, more menacing. But what she got was something that looked, in many ways, like a very large family reunion held in a diner parking lot. Men leaning on motorcycles talking about their kids. Women sharing food they'd packed for the road. Old friendships being picked up mid-sentence as if the intervening years hadn't happened. An enormous man named Pete who ducked his head through the diner door and asked very politely if he could use the restroom and could he have one of those pieces of pie in the case. She cut him a piece. He ate it standing at the counter and told her it was the best peach pie he'd had since his mother's, which he said with the particular sincerity of a man who did not throw compliments casually. "She taught you to make this?" he asked. "William's recipe," Claire said. Pete looked toward the parking lot, toward William. "Yeah," he said quietly, "that tracks." Stone came in at noon and sat at the counter and Claire poured him coffee and he said, without any preamble, "Tell me what happened. All of it, from the first night," she told him. All of it, the way she had told William. The coffee pot moved to the other side. Ryan's smile, The $20 bill, the broken compressor, Sandra taking time off, the pickup truck driving slow through the parking lot. Stone listened to all of it with the same kind of absolute attention that William used, that complete stillness that made you feel like every word was being weighed and kept. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You were alone every time." "William was there sometimes," she said. "But they came for you," he said, "specifically because they thought a young woman working alone would be the easiest thing to break." Break. She didn't answer that. She didn't need to. Stone looked at his coffee cup. "I want you to understand something," he said. "What William called us for, this is not unusual for us. Standing between something worth protecting and the thing threatening it. That's not new." He paused. "What's unusual is that William called it all. In 12 years, he has not asked us for a single thing. He has been asked for things he has given, but he has never called and said he needed something." He looked at her directly. "So whatever you are to him, whatever this place is to him, and it matters more than you probably know." She didn't have words for that. She just nodded. Stone finished his coffee and stood. "Make more," he said. "We'll be here a while." She made more. At 3 in the afternoon, something happened that she had not anticipated. The phone rang. She picked it up. Silver Ridge Diner. There was a pause on the other end. Then Ryan Cole's voice, and it was different from any other time she had heard it. Not quite the controlled, amused confidence he usually projected, but something tighter. Something with a question mark running underneath it. "What's going on over there?" he said. She looked out the window at the parking lot full of motorcycles, at the 70-plus people who had traveled from Reno and Salt Lake and Phoenix. "We're just having a busy day," she said pleasantly. "Lot of customers. You want to make a reservation?" A long silence. "Put Carter on," he said. "I'll see if he's available," she said. She set the phone down and went to the door and called out, "William, phone's for you." William came in, looked at the phone, picked it up. His face was completely neutral. "Ryan," he said. She could not hear Ryan's side of the conversation. She watched William's face. Whatever Ryan was saying, it was apparently enough. Enough to tell him that the calculation he had been running for the past 2 weeks had just changed fundamentally. William listened for about 30 seconds. Then he said simply, "You should come and see for yourself." Another pause. "Or don't come," William said. "That's also a choice. But if you don't come, then we need to talk about the alternative, which is that the people in this parking lot would very much like to pay visits to every business along this highway and ask politely for their testimonies. And once they have those testimonies, they'll be making some calls of their own to people who wear badges instead of patches." He paused. "Your choice, Ryan. Come and talk, or let this go somewhere you don't control." He hung up. He set the phone on the counter. Claire stared at him. "Was that a negotiation open-end?" William said. "Yes. Do you think he'll come?" William looked out the window at the parking lot, at Stone leaning against his motorcycle, talking to a woman with silver-streaked hair and a leather jacket who was laughing at something he'd said, at 70-plus people who had simply shown up because one of their own had asked. "I think," William said slowly, "that Ryan Cole has spent the past 2 weeks believing this was a situation he controlled, and he just found out it isn't." He turned to Claire. "That's the most dangerous moment with a man like that, when he realizes the world doesn't look the way he thought it did." She looked at him. "So what do we do?" He said, "We make dinner, we feed these people, and we wait." She picked up her apron. "How many eggs do we have?" she asked. "Not enough," he said. "I'll call the supplier." "Already did," he said. "Delivery's in an hour." She looked at him. He looked back at her. And she realized, not for the first time, that William Carter had been 3 steps ahead of all of this since the beginning. Not because he was cold or calculating, but because he had lived in a world where being 3 steps ahead was what kept people safe. And that particular knowledge didn't leave a man just because he traded his leather jacket for a diner apron. She tied her apron and turned back to the kitchen. Outside in the parking lot, the sun was dropping toward the western edge of the sky, and the Nevada desert was doing what it always did at this hour, turning everything it touched to gold. Inside the Silver Ridge Diner, the coffee was hot, the pie was real, and the people who had come to stand between danger and something worth protecting were getting hungry. She had work to do. And somewhere out on the highway, Ryan Cole was making a decision. He just didn't know yet that every option available to him had already been thought through by a quiet man who made very good coffee and who, 12 years ago, had walked away from a world that had taught him one thing above all others. The only power that lasts is the kind that protects something. Everything else is just noise. End of part 2. The delivery truck arrived at 4:15, 45 minutes late, and the driver, a young guy named Marcus, who had been making supply runs to Silver Ridge for about a year, pulled into the lot, looked at what was parked there, and sat in his cab for a full 30 seconds before getting out. Claire met him at the back of the truck. Marcus said. I know, Claire said. Eggs are in the back? Yeah, they're... Yeah. He opened the truck doors, still looking over his shoulder at the motorcycles, at the men and women moving through the lot. You having a party? Something like that, she said. Help me with these. He helped her carry 6 crates of eggs, 4 extra blocks of butter, 3 gallons of milk, and 2 cases of bread into the kitchen without asking another question. When he left, he drove out of the lot with the slow, careful attention of a man who wanted to make absolutely certain he did not scratch a single one of those motorcycles. Inside, Claire organized the kitchen with the focused efficiency of someone who had worked short-staffed too many times to panic about it. She had cooked before, not professionally, not formally, but hunger and need are excellent teachers, and she had fed her family through harder nights than this on less than what she had available now. She laid out eggs, butter, bread, the leftover chili from the lunch prep, several pans of cornbread she'd put together in the early afternoon without quite knowing why, as if some part of her had understood before her conscious mind caught up that tonight was going to require feeding. William came in through the kitchen door at 4:30 and looked at what she'd assembled. You didn't have to do this, he said. Yes, I did, she said without looking up. Go ask Stone how many people have food allergies. I don't want to put someone in the hospital on top of everything else. He almost smiled. He went back out. He came back 2 minutes later. 3 people can't do gluten. 1 woman's allergic to eggs. I've got options for all of them, she said. He stood there for a moment watching her work. She could feel him watching, the way you can always feel it when someone is looking at you with something more than ordinary attention, something that carries weight. Claire, he said, William, I'm in the middle of... I know, I just need you to hear something. She stopped. She turned around, a spatula in one hand, a dish towel over her shoulder. I should have told you sooner, he said, about all of it, about who I was, about what I was doing when I made those calls. You were standing at that counter every day not knowing what was coming or what shape it would take, and that wasn't fair to you. She looked at him. It's fine, William. It's not, actually, he said. You deserve to know what you were walking into. She thought about that for a moment. She thought about whether, if he had told her from the beginning, told her on that first night after Ryan Cole left, told her I used to be a Hell's Angel and I'm going to call them and 70 people might show up, whether she would have felt differently about any of it. She didn't think she would have. Would you have made different choices? She asked. If you'd told me earlier? No, he said. Would I have made different choices? He considered that. I don't know. I would have stayed, she said. I would have stayed and done exactly what I've been doing. So the only thing telling me sooner would have changed is that I would have had more days of being scared about a bigger thing instead of just the thing I knew about. She turned back to the stove. Let me cook, William. He was quiet for a moment. Then, thank you. Stop thanking me and go tell Stone dinner's in an hour, she said. He went. She cooked. And in the cooking, in the specific, grounded, physical act of cracking eggs and flipping cornbread and stirring chili and making sure the coffee was always fresh, she found something she hadn't had in 10 days. Steadiness, the kind that doesn't come from nothing going wrong, but from knowing exactly what your hands are doing and trusting them to keep doing it. She served food out of the diner's pass-through window for an hour and 15 minutes straight. People came up in loose groups, took plates, thanked her with a directness that she liked. No excessive politeness, no performance, just a genuine acknowledgement that went both ways. A woman named Rita, mid-40s, who had ridden up from Reno, handed her empty plate back through the window and said, "That cornbread is serious. You make that from scratch?" "Always," Claire said. You charging for this? Consider it covered, Claire said. Rita looked at her steadily. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more rattled. She paused. Those guys came in here and threatened you, and you're standing in there cooking dinner for 70 people. 73, Claire said. Rita almost smiled. 73, she agreed. What's your secret? Claire thought about it honestly. I got mad, she said, and it turns out mad is more useful than scared. Rita nodded once, the way people nod when they recognize something true from their own experience. She took her plate and went back out. By 6:30, the food was done, and the sky outside was moving from gold into that deep amber that the Nevada desert did in the final hour before dark, the light going long and serious across the highway. And the diner had settled into a particular kind of waiting that was different from the waiting of the past 10 days. That earlier waiting had been anxious and shapeless, like standing in a room where you can hear someone moving outside the door, but you don't know who it is or when they'll come through. This waiting was different. This waiting had a shape to it, a wait that was solid rather than dreadful. Stone came inside at 6:45 and sat at the counter. He didn't want more coffee. He just sat there, the way old soldiers sit when they're waiting, conserving, not expending, thinking inward. William sat next to him. The two men were quiet together for a while, and Claire moved around the diner doing the small closing tasks that filled the end of every shift. And the three of them were in that space, that particular suspended space of a night that hasn't yet become what it's going to become. When Stone said without preamble, "He'll come," William didn't ask who he meant. "You think so?" "He has to," Stone said. "A man like that has got too much invested in being the one who doesn't back down. If he just disappears tonight, his whole operation is finished. Every business owner on this highway will know he folded. He's got to come and try to reframe what's happening. Make it look like his choice." William considered this. "He might bring more men." "Might," Stone agreed. "Doesn't change the math." "He could get dangerous," William said. And the word dangerous in William's mouth had a very specific gravity to it. The gravity of a man who understood danger not as an abstraction, but as a set of concrete choices and their consequences. "If he gets dangerous," Stone said, "we stay legal. Everything we do tonight, we've already decided it stays legal. Evidence goes to the sheriff. Testimonies go to the DA. Nobody touches anyone. We stand here and we let him see what standing here looks like. That's all." "That's all," William said. Stone turned to look at him. "You believed in something when you walked away, William. Don't lose that tonight." William held his old friend's gaze for a moment. Something moved between them that had no need of words. "I know," he said. "Good." Stone turned back to the counter. "Now, do you have pie left? Because Bobby Reyes has been talking about your pie for an hour, and I'm starting to think about it myself." William looked at Claire. Claire looked at the case. "2 peach and 1 apple," she said. "Both," Stone said. She cut them each a piece. The pie was good. She knew it was good. She watched Stone take the first bite and watched his expression do that specific thing that people's faces do when food is better than expected, a brief involuntary softening that happens too fast to be performed. "William," Stone said, "Yeah, your waitress can cook." "I know," William said. "That's not a waitress," Stone said. "That's a partner." William looked at Claire. She looked back at him. Something shifted in the air between them, not romantic, not transactional, something more fundamental than either. An acknowledgement, a recognition of what the past 2 years had actually been, laid out plainly now in the light of everything that had happened. She didn't say anything. She picked up the coffee pot and refilled both their cups. Some things didn't need a speech. At 7:20, one of the men outside knocked on the diner's front window. He was younger, maybe 30, with dark eyes that moved quickly, and he pointed toward the highway without saying anything. William stood up. Stone was already moving. Claire came around the counter and stood at the window. On the highway, a line of vehicles was approaching. Not motorcycles. Cars and trucks. 4 of them, moving together, slowing as they reached the Silver Ridge turnoff. Ryan Cole's convoy. She counted 4 vehicles, which meant she wasn't sure how many men, could be 2 per vehicle, could be more. She watched William and Stone step outside. She watched the men and women in the parking lot shift their posture, nothing aggressive, nothing theatrical, just a collective, quiet realignment. People who had been leaning and relaxed became people who were standing and present. It happened in about 5 seconds, and it was, she thought, one of the most remarkable things she had ever witnessed. The way a group of people who trusted each other completely could change their posture together without a signal, without a command, just through the shared understanding of what was needed. She pushed open the diner door and stepped outside. She was not going to watch this through a window. The 4 vehicles pulled into the lot and stopped. Engines off, a long moment of stillness. Then Ryan Cole got out of the passenger side of the front truck. He stood there and looked at the parking lot, at the motorcycles, at the people, at William Carter standing 15 feet away with Stone at his shoulder. She watched Ryan's face go through something. Not fear exactly. She didn't think Ryan Cole was a man who experienced fear in the ordinary way. More like the specific cognitive disruption that happens when reality fails to match the model you've been operating from. Like when you reach for a glass that isn't where you left it and your hand moves through empty air. He had come here expecting to find 1 cafe owner and 1 waitress. He was looking at 73 people instead. He recovered. She had to give him credit for that. He recovered fast, pulled his expression back to something that was trying to be casual, and walked forward toward William. His men got out of the other vehicles. She counted them quickly. 11 against 73. The math was not subtle. William, Ryan said. He stopped about 8 feet away. His eyes moved once across the crowd behind William and then came back to William's face with a forced steadiness. Nice turnout. It's been a good evening, William said. Friends of yours? Family, William said, same word he'd used with Claire. Ryan's jaw worked slightly. I didn't know you had family like this. Most people don't, William said. That's usually how it works. Ryan's eyes moved again, this time to Claire, who was standing off to William's right. Not behind him, not to the side, but deliberately at a slight angle that put her in his line of sight. She held his gaze. She didn't fold her arms. She didn't look away. She just looked at him the way she had looked at him across the counter every single time he'd come in, with that flat, clear, unafraid steadiness that had frustrated him from the beginning. She saw it frustrate him now. He looked back at William. This doesn't change anything, he said, and his voice was still mostly controlled, but the mostly was doing a lot of work. You think bringing a crowd is going to make this go away? I've got arrangements with half the county. I've got relationships. You can't just... We have testimonies, Stone said. Ryan stopped. He looked at Stone for the first time, really looked at him, and something in what he saw made him recalibrate slightly. The way a person recalibrates when they realize they've been looking at something the wrong way and the correct way is less comfortable than they'd hoped. Excuse me? Ryan said. Testimonies, Stone repeated. He said it pleasantly, the way you might say the weather has been nice. 7 business owners along this highway signed his statements, dates, amounts, specific threats. What was said and by whom? He paused. Plus the incident record from this diner. Dates, witnesses, a phone recording of your conversation with Mr. Carter this afternoon. Ryan's face did something complicated. You recorded that. Mr. Carter's phone records that call automatically, Stone said. Has for years. It's disclosed in the outgoing message. You'll remember it said, this call may be recorded when he picked up. He tilted his head. Did you not hear that? The silence that followed was very loud. Claire watched Ryan Cole stand in that silence and feel, for the first time since she had known of him, the specific sensation of having played a game confidently and badly at the same time. Behind Ryan, his men were looking at each other. 11 people against 73, and the 73 were not moving, not threatening, not raising their voices. They were simply standing there being exactly what they were, which was enough. Which was, in its own way, more powerful than any raised voice or clenched fist could have been. One of Ryan's men, not Tommy, not Dex, someone she hadn't seen before. A younger guy with the look of someone who had not entirely committed to the life he'd fallen into, took a small step backward. Unconscious. Instinctive. Tommy noticed it and looked at the guy with an expression that was trying to be contemptuous and landing closer to uneasy. Ryan said, his voice finding a harder edge because the softer options were closing. You think some statements are going to... The statements are already filed, William said. Ryan stopped again. Filed, he said. This afternoon, William said, with the Elko County Sheriff's Office, and separately with the state's Organized Crime Task Force in Carson City. He paused. We didn't wait for tonight, Ryan. Tonight is just, he looked around the parking lot. Courtesy, so you heard it in person. The ground had shifted under Ryan Cole's feet, and he was the last one to feel it because he had been too busy watching the thing he thought was the problem to notice the thing that actually was. He had been watching for a fight. There was no fight. There had never been going to be a fight. There had been, instead, a systematic and methodical dismantling of everything he'd built along that highway, conducted quietly over the course of a week, while he'd been focused on parking lot drive-bys and broken compressors and $20 tips designed to feel like price tags. He had been so certain he was the one with the plan. He said one more time with the last of whatever he'd walked in here with, "You're going to regret this." William looked at him. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, with something much quieter and much more final than either. "Ryan," he said, "I walked away from a life that gave me every reason to be the kind of man you are. I built something small and honest instead. I hired good people and I made good coffee and I tried to take care of the people who came through my door." He paused. "You came to take that from me. You came to take it from Claire. You came to take it from every business owner on this highway who was too scared to say no." He looked at him steadily. "The only person who's going to regret anything tonight is you, and that already happened, about 30 seconds after you pulled into this lot." Ryan looked at him. He looked at Stone. He looked at the 73 people standing in the parking lot in the deepening dark of a Nevada evening. Not violent, not theatrical, just present and immovable and completely united in the specific way that only people who have chosen each other can be. He looked at Claire. She looked back at him. Neither of them spoke. Then Ryan Cole turned around, got back in his truck, and his convoy left the lot. 4 vehicles, 11 men, out onto the highway and gone. The sound of their engines faded in about 90 seconds. The parking lot was quiet, and then someone in the back, she never found out who, let out a long breath that turned into a low sound of relief, and the tension that had held 73 people in perfect stillness released all at once. And the noise that replaced it was warm and human and alive. Stone turned to William. "Legal," he said with the slight emphasis that carried the weight of their earlier conversation. "Legal," William confirmed. Stone nodded once, satisfied. "Good." He turned toward the lot. "All right," he called out, not loudly but clearly, the voice of a man whose voice people listened to. "That's it. Somebody tell Bobby Reyes he can stop looking like he's about to have a heart attack." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Claire stood in the middle of it and felt the laughter move through her like something physical, like warmth, like the specific relief of a weight that has been set down after being carried too long. She was shaking again, not from fear, not from anger. She wasn't entirely sure what it was. Joy was too simple a word. Relief didn't cover it. What it felt like more than anything was the particular sensation of having stood in a place and refused to move and found out afterward that the standing had mattered. William was next to her then. She hadn't heard him approach. He just appeared at her shoulder the way he sometimes did, quietly and without fuss. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "You sure?" She looked at him. "I'm crying a little bit." "I can see that," he said. "I'm fine," she said. "I know you are," he said. They stood there together for a moment, in the middle of a parking lot full of people who had come from hundreds of miles away for one quiet man and one stubborn waitress in a diner that made good pie. Then Stone appeared on William's other side and said briskly, "Right, now that that's handled, does anyone know if there's any of that cornbread left? Because I'm asking for a friend and also for myself." Claire started laughing again. She couldn't help it. "There's cornbread," she said. "Thank God," Stone said sincerely and turned toward the diner door. Inside, the coffee was still hot, the way it always was at Silver Ridge, because Claire Morgan never let the coffee go cold on her watch. And the lights were on, every single one of them, burning warm and steady against the Nevada night. Outside, 73 motorcycles sat in a cracked asphalt parking lot 23 miles outside of Elko, and their riders were laughing and talking and starting to think about the long ride home and the highway that had felt for the past 10 days like something dangerous and owned, felt like what it actually was again. Just a road, going both ways, belonging to anyone who had the right to travel it, which was everyone, which had always been everyone. Ryan Cole's taillights had long since disappeared into the dark, and the Silver Ridge Diner stood exactly where it had always stood, lit up and open, a small, warm thing in a big, dark desert, holding its ground. End of part 3. The cornbread was gone by 8:30. Claire found that out when Pete, the enormous man who had asked to use the restroom earlier and had become something of an unofficial ambassador between the parking lot and the diner kitchen, appeared at the pass-through window with a mournful expression and reported the situation as though delivering battlefield news. Last piece went to Bobby Reyes, Pete said, which, full disclosure, I let happen because Bobby drove up from Phoenix and I figured he had it coming. But I want you to know it cost me something. I can make more tomorrow, Claire said. Pete brightened visibly. We're staying tonight. Stone booked out the Comfort Inn on Route 12. Whole place. Manager nearly passed out when 40 bikes pulled into the lot, but Stone handled it. Stone handles everything, Claire observed. Pretty much, Pete agreed cheerfully. She was cleaning the kitchen when William came in at 9 o'clock, sat down on the stool by the prep counter, and said nothing. Just sat. She had learned, over 2 years, to read his silences. This one was not troubled. It was the silence of a man processing the distance between where he had been and where he was now, and finding that the distance was survivable. She kept working. Let him sit. After about 4 minutes, he said, I owe some phone calls. She looked up. To who? The business owners who gave statements, he said. Frank at the gas station. The couple with the produce stand. 5 others. He paused. They took a risk. They deserve to hear what happened tonight. You didn't call them already? She asked. Stone called them this afternoon when we had the statements filed, he said. But they deserve to hear it from me. She dried her hands and leaned against the counter and looked at him. William, can I ask you something? You can always ask me something, he said. How did you get the other business owners to give statements? I thought they were too scared. I thought that was the whole problem. That Ryan was careful and nothing was ever written down and everyone was too afraid to talk. William was quiet for a moment. Stone sent 2 people to each of them, he said, not threatening, just showing up, sitting down, having a conversation. He paused. Sometimes when people are afraid, what they need isn't a guarantee of safety. They need to see that someone else is willing to stand up first. Once one person said yes, the next one was easier. And the next. She thought about that. Who went first? He looked at her. Something in his expression was careful, deliberate. You did, he said. You were the first person on that highway who looked Ryan Cole in the eye and didn't give him what he wanted. Frank at the gas station. He told Stone that he heard what you did and it made him feel like he could do it too. He paused. You started something without knowing it. The statements, the filing, all of it. It builds from the night you told Ryan Cole your boss would know what happened. She stood there and let that land. She thought about that first night, the coffee pot on the other side of the counter, the $20 bill, her hands shaking as she dialed William's number. She had not felt, in that moment, like someone starting anything. She had felt like someone trying very hard not to fall apart in front of customers. I didn't do anything brave, she said. I was terrified. Being terrified and doing it anyway is the only kind of brave there is, William said. The other kind is just not understanding the situation. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Is Ryan Cole going to be arrested? That's up to the DA's office now, William said. The testimonies are filed. The recording is filed. It's out of our hands. He paused. But yes, I think so, yes. She nodded slowly. And his men? The ones with specific actions against specific properties. The compressor, the intimidation incidents with witnesses present. Those are documented. He looked at his hands. Tommy Briggs has 3 prior charges. This will not help him. Good, she said, and then immediately, is it wrong that I feel good about that? No, William said firmly. No, it's not. She went back to cleaning. He made his phone calls from the corner booth, one after another, each call about 5 minutes, and she could hear the tone of each conversation without hearing the words. The relief on the other end, the gratitude, the release of a tension that had been building for months in people who had been grinding down under the weight of it silently. Frank from the gas station apparently talked for 15 minutes. She could tell because William sat through it without speaking much, just occasionally saying yes or I understand or I know. Frank, or the simple, valuable confirmation of I hear you. When he hung up, he sat for a moment with his hand on the phone and his head slightly bowed. She brought him coffee without being asked. He looked up. Frank's been paying them for 6 months, he said quietly. He has a daughter. She works the register on weekends. Ryan made a comment about her once. His voice was very even. Very specific comment about what could happen to people who didn't cooperate. The kitchen was very quiet. 6 months, she said. 6 months, William said, alone, afraid to call anyone because he didn't think anyone would come. She thought about Frank, whoever he was, driving to and from that gas station for 6 months with that weight on him, handing money to people who threatened his daughter, going home every night and not knowing how to make it stop. He knows now that someone came, she said. Yes, William said. He knows now. She put her hand briefly on his shoulder, one quick, firm press, nothing prolonged, and went back to the kitchen. He drank his coffee and made the rest of his calls. At 10 o'clock, Stone came in with a man Claire hadn't spoken to yet, shorter, compact, with quick dark eyes and the economical movements of someone who did not waste energy on anything that wasn't necessary. Stone introduced him as Bobby Reyes, and Bobby Reyes shook Claire's hand with both of his and said, I heard about the cornbread. I want you to know I feel guilty about Pete. Pete will survive, Claire said. Pete is enormous. Pete will definitely survive. Bobby sat at the counter and accepted coffee. He looked around the diner with the particular appreciation of someone who had spent a lot of time in a lot of diners and had strong opinions about what made one good. This is a good place, he said. It was a simple statement, but he meant it like a verdict. Thank you, Claire said. I'm serious. I've been in a lot of diners. This one has the thing. You know the thing? He looked at her. I know the thing, she said. Most places don't have it. You can't fake it. He picked up his coffee cup. William built it, but you keep it. You know that, right? The reason people come back here isn't the pie. Well, he corrected, the pie is excellent. But the reason people come back is because this place feels like someone is paying attention. She thought about Earl Dawson and his 2 sugars he pretended he didn't take. She thought about Mildred Cho and her grilled cheese. She thought about the woman from San Francisco who had pressed her hand and said, I needed this today. Someone is paying attention, she said. Bobby nodded. I drove 9 hours to be here tonight, he said. I want you to understand that. 9 hours because William Carter called and said he needed help. He paused. I haven't seen that man in 8 years. The last time I saw him was at a funeral, his brother's funeral, and he was the steadiest person in that room, the person everyone else leaned on. He turned his coffee cup. He never asked for anything back. Not once in 12 years did that man call in a debt. He looked at her. He called for you, for this place. I want you to know that. She had to look away for a moment. She looked at the coffee maker and breathed in and breathed out. He didn't call for me, she said when she trusted her voice again. He called for what's right. Bobby Reyes smiled. It was a sudden, genuine smile that changed his whole face. Yeah, he said, that's also true. But you and what's right ended up in the same place, so. Stone set down his cup and said, without looking up, Bobby, stop making the woman cry. I'm not crying, Claire said at the exact same moment that her eyes absolutely betrayed her. Stone looked up, looked at her. You're a tough one, he said. I mean that as the highest compliment I know how to give. I'll take it, she said, and wiped her eyes with the dish towel and turned back to the counter. William came in from the corner booth, and the 4 of them sat at the counter together, William and Stone and Bobby Reyes and Claire Morgan, and the diner hummed around them the way it always did. That particular frequency of a place that is doing what it was made to do, holding people at the end of a hard day. They talked for a while, not about Ryan Cole or testimonies or legal filings, about simpler things. Stone told a story about a breakdown outside Flagstaff in 2019 that involved a wrong turn, a sheep farm, and a misunderstanding with a border collie that went on long enough to become genuinely funny. Bobby Reyes added details Stone had apparently gotten wrong. William sat with his coffee and occasionally corrected one or the other of them with the quiet authority of someone who had been there. Claire listened and laughed in the right places and felt the particular comfort of being included in an old story which is one of the ways people signal to each other that you belong. At 11, Stone stood and said he needed to get the group settled at the motel. He paused at the door and looked at William. "I'm going to say one thing," Stone said, "and then I'm going to go, and I'm not going to say it again." William looked at him. "You were wrong to stay away so long," Stone said. It was not an accusation. It was something gentler and more serious than an accusation. "Not from the life, from that I understand and I respect, but from us, the people." He held William's gaze. "We missed you, and whatever you were trying to prove by doing it all alone, you proved it. You built something real. You're a good man. You were always a good man." He paused. "But good men still need people." William was very still for a moment. That complete stillness that Claire had spent 2 years watching without understanding. She understood it now. She understood it was not distance. It was depth. The stillness of a man who felt things at a level that would show on the surface if he let it, and had learned through long discipline to hold the surface steady. "I know," William said. "Good," Stone said. "Breakfast tomorrow, all of us. Whatever that costs you, I don't want to hear about it." "I'm not charging you for breakfast," William said. "No, you're not," Stone agreed pleasantly and walked out. Bobby Reyes finished his coffee, set the cup down, and looked at William. "He's right," he said simply. "I know," William said again. Bobby nodded. He looked at Claire. 9 hours, he said, reminding her. "Sleep well." And then he too was gone. The diner was quiet. Claire wiped down the counter. William sat and watched her work. Outside, the sound of motorcycles starting up, engines moving away toward Route 12 in the motel, the lot clearing out until there were only 4 bikes left. Men Stone had apparently assigned to stay within proximity overnight. Though they were parked on the highway shoulder and staying outside, having made it clear without being asked that they understood the difference between being present and being intrusive. She finished the counter. She started on the tables. "Claire," William said. "I'm almost done," she said. "Leave it," he said. "I'll get it in the morning." She looked at him. He almost never said leave it. He was as particular about the end-of-night cleanup as he was about anything. "You sure?" "I'm sure." He stood and put on his jacket. "It's been a long week." "It's been a long week," she agreed. They walked out together, and William locked the front door. The 4 motorcycles on the shoulder were quiet. The men sitting near them nodded once, acknowledging professional. William nodded back. Claire lifted a hand. She walked to her car. William walked to his truck. She had her keys out when he said from across the lot, "Claire." She looked over. "Thank you," he said, "for staying through all of it." She thought about what to say. She thought about the past 10 days, the shaking hands and the furious mornings, and Sandra taking time off and the compressor making the wrong sound, and Ryan Cole's smile and $60-some of cornbread, ingredients, and 73 motorcycles pulling into a cracked asphalt lot in the Nevada desert. "You gave me a job when I needed one," she said. "You didn't ask me to explain myself. You just said yes." She paused. "You think I was going to walk away from that?" He looked at her across the parking lot for a moment. "Go home," he said. "Sleep." "You too," she said. She drove home on the empty highway, and the night was wet and dark and full of stars. And somewhere behind her, the diner lights were still on because William always left one light burning when the place was closed. She didn't know it then, but she would think about that light often in the months that followed. The way one light left on deliberately changes the quality of the dark around it. Not eliminating the dark, just making it less absolute. 3 days later, the news arrived the way news arrives in small towns, not through official channels first, but through the specific human network of people who saw things. Earl Dawson came in on Tuesday morning and sat down and took his coffee with his 2 sugars he didn't take and said, without looking up from his cup, "Heard Ryan Cole got picked up yesterday afternoon." Claire set down the coffee pot. "Where'd you hear that?" "Greta Simmons works dispatch," Earl said. "She called her sister. Her sister told the pastor. Pastor told the hardware store." He shrugged, the shrug of a man who has lived in a small town long enough to understand that information has its own roads and travels them faster than vehicles. "And," she said, "and Tommy Briggs got picked up too, and 2 others. Earl looked at her now. The DA's office is apparently being unusually enthusiastic about this one. Someone from the Organized Crime Task Force drove up from Carson City personally. She absorbed this. She turned and went to the kitchen door and pushed it open. William, she said. He came out. She told him what Earl had said. He listened. His face did not change much, but something in his posture, something very subtle, released, like a breath he had been holding for 11 days. Good, yeah, he said. Good, she agreed. Earl drank his coffee. Also, he said, I saw Frank Delgado at the gas station this morning. He was smiling. First time I've seen Frank smile in about 6 months. He set the cup down. Just thought that was worth mentioning. The word spread, the way things spread in a place where everybody's story is connected to everybody else's. By Wednesday, Sandra was back. She called Tuesday evening and said, voice a little unsteady, is it safe now? And Claire said yes. And Sandra said she'd be in at 6, and she was there at 5:45. Pulling into the lot as the sky was still gray. And when she walked in and hugged Claire, it was the kind of hug that means more than its surface. The hug of someone who left and came back and is grateful the place is still standing. I'm sorry, Sandra said into Claire's shoulder. I should have stayed. You have kids, Claire said. You did the right thing. I should have stayed, Sandra said again. The way people say things they need to say regardless of the answer. You're here now, Claire said. That's what matters. By Thursday, the regulars started coming back. Not all at once, not in a rush, not with fanfare. The way regulars come back when they feel safe again, which is quietly, one at a time, sliding back into their usual seats like they'd never left, ordering their usual things, reclaiming the particular small territories of comfort that regular customers stake out in places they trust. Mildred Cho came in Thursday morning, sat in her usual booth, asked for the soup, and ordered the grilled cheese. Claire wrote it down without comment, but she was smiling. On Friday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the night, 3 men had walked into the Silver Ridge Diner and decided a young waitress was an easy target. A woman walked in that Claire didn't recognize. Mid-40s, professional looking, carrying a recorder and a notepad. She sat at the counter and asked for coffee and introduced herself as a journalist from a regional paper in Reno. Claire poured her coffee and called William. He came out, sat across from the journalist, and listened to what she wanted. She had heard about what had happened. Not everything, but the shape of it, which had apparently made its way from the Elko County Sheriff's Office to someone's social media to the journalist editor in about 48 hours, the way stories move now. I want to tell the story, the journalist said. Not the gang angle. I don't want to write about outlaw motorcycle clubs. I want to write about the business owners on this highway who stood up together. The community angle. William looked at her. Why? She paused, surprised by the directness of the question. Because it's a good story, she said. Because people need to hear about things going right for once. And the people along this highway, William said. Frank Delgado, the produce stand couple, the others. If their names are in a story, what does that do for them? The journalist was quiet for a moment. She was, Claire thought, a person genuinely thinking about the question rather than deflecting it. It could help them, she said carefully, or it could make them targets for someone else down the line. I won't pretend I know for certain. She paused. That's why I'm asking instead of just writing. William considered this for a long moment. Talk to them, he said finally. Not to me. Talk to Frank and the others. If they want their story told, it's their story to tell. I'll give you their numbers. She nodded. And you? Would you talk to me? He was quiet. Background, she said. Not about the motorcycle club, about the diner, about why you've been here for 12 years. She looked around the Silver Ridge, at the duct-taped booths and the flickering sign, and the coffee maker and Claire behind the counter, and the whole small, honest thing that William Carter had built on a cracked asphalt highway in the Nevada desert. About what this place is. William looked at Claire. She raised an eyebrow. His call. He looked back at this journalist. One condition, he said. Name it, she said. The story isn't about me, he said. I'm not the story. The people on this highway who were afraid and stood up anyway, they're the story. You lead with Frank. You lead with the produce stand. You lead with the people who had the most to lose and did it anyway. The journalist held his gaze for a moment and then wrote something on her notepad. Deal, she said. She stayed for 2 hours. She talked to William. She talked to Claire, who told her about the coffee pot and the $20 bill and the shaking hands. Told it plainly, without drama. The way you tell a true story when you don't need to embellish it because the truth is already the thing. When she left, she paused at the door and looked back at Claire. Can I ask you one more thing, off the record? Sure, Claire said. Were you scared? Claire thought about it honestly. Every single day, she said. The journalist looked at her. And you stayed anyway. And I stayed anyway, Claire said. The journalist nodded. She didn't write it down. She just nodded like she was filing it somewhere more permanent than a notepad. Then she was gone. Saturday morning brought something none of them had anticipated. Claire arrived at 5:45, same as always, unlocked the door, started the coffee. She was behind the counter when she heard the motorcycle. One. Familiar. She looked out. Pete, the enormous man who had eaten the last piece of cornbread. He was alone, sitting on his bike in the lot, and when he saw her through the window, he raised one hand in greeting. She opened the door. Pete, what are you? Stone sent me back to pick something up, he said. He left his jacket here last night, left it on the booth. He paused. Also, I was hoping there might be cornbread. She looked at him. This man who had driven back. She didn't know how far from the motel to Route 12, for a jacket and a hope of cornbread. Come in, she said. It's not ready yet. I'll wait, he said without hesitation. He sat at the counter and she made the cornbread, and while she made it, he told her about his kids. 2 daughters, 11 and 14, who he was teaching to ride, and about his regular job, which was carpentry, custom furniture, which surprised her and then didn't surprise her at all when she thought about his hands and the careful way he moved through a space. When the cornbread came out, she cut him a piece and he ate it with his eyes closed for a moment, the way people eat things they've been looking forward to. Worth it? She asked. Every mile, he said. He found Stone's jacket in the corner of the last booth, the one nearest the door. He folded it over his arm and stood. He reached into his jacket pocket and put something on the counter. She looked at it, a phone number, handwritten on a piece of paper. That's Stone's number, Pete said, and mine's on the back. You ever need anything? And I mean anything, Claire, not just the kind of anything with 73 motorcycles. I mean also the kind of anything where a pipe bursts or the truck won't start, or you just need someone to talk to who isn't already in the middle of whatever the problem is. He paused. You call, okay? She picked up the paper. Okay, she said. I mean it. I know you do, she said. He nodded once, pulled on his helmet, and was gone. The sound of his engine fading down the highway toward Route 12, toward the motel, toward whatever road home looked like for Pete the carpenter, who rode on weekends and loved cornbread and had driven 9 hours with 72 other people to stand in a parking lot for a quiet man who had never asked for anything. She put the number in her apron pocket. William came in at 6:30, same as always, poured his coffee, sat at the counter. Pete came back, she said. I know, William said. He texted me. He wants me to call if I need anything. So do most of the people who were here Thursday night, William said. You made an impression. I made cornbread, she said. Same thing, William said. She refilled his coffee and her own and sat across from him for a moment. Something she rarely did, because there was always something to be doing. But this morning felt like the kind of morning that deserved a minute of stillness. The kind where you pause and take stock of where you are, how you got here, and what it cost and what it gave back. The highway outside was quiet. The morning was clear. The neon sign flickered on the word open, same as it always had, same small hesitation on the same letter. A quirk of the sign that William had been meaning to fix for 3 years, and that Claire had quietly decided she'd be sad to see gone. William, she said, yeah. What happens now? I mean, after the trial, after all of it settles, what does this place become? He looked at her. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. That slow, deliberate rotation she had seen 100 times. Same thing it's always been, he said. A diner, good coffee, real pie, people looking after each other. She thought about that. Is that enough? He looked at her with those still eyes that she understood now, the depth behind them, the weight of what they'd seen and chosen and walked away from and built instead. It's everything, he said. She nodded slowly. Outside, the first truck of the morning was pulling into the lot. She could hear the engine, the hiss of air brakes, the particular sequence of sounds that meant the day was starting, that people were coming in who needed something, who were hungry or tired, or in between places and looking for a moment of being held still. She stood and picked up the coffee pot. She had work to do. And for the first time in 11 days, the doing of it felt exactly like what it had always been. Not a fight, not a stand, not a battle for survival. Just the quiet, daily, serious work of taking care of people, which was, she had decided, enough to be worth protecting, which was, she had decided, worth every single shaking moment of fear. The article ran on a Wednesday morning, 6 weeks after the night 73 motorcycles filled a cracked asphalt parking lot on a Nevada highway. Claire found out it had been published because Earl Dawson came in at 7:15 instead of his usual 7:45, set his phone face up on the counter, and slid it toward her without saying a word. She read the headline first, then the subheading. Then she sat down on the stool behind the counter and read the whole thing from the beginning, which took her about 8 minutes, and William came out of the kitchen because she hadn't responded to the sound of the bell and found her sitting there with Earl's phone in her hands and her eyes doing something complicated. "What is it?" he said. She handed him the phone. He read it, standing at the counter. She watched his face the way she had learned to watch it, tracking the subtle movements that told you what was happening underneath. He read it twice. She knew he read it twice because his eyes went back to the top after they reached the bottom. Then he set the phone down very carefully on the counter and said nothing for a moment. The article was not sensational. The journalist had kept her word. It led with Frank Delgado, the gas station owner, and the 6 months he had spent handing over money to protect his daughter from a comment that had cost him sleep every single night. It went through each business owner on the highway, name by choice. Every one of them, their stories told in their own words, with a specificity and dignity that made each one land differently, but with the same cumulative weight. The produce stand couple, Donna and Gerald Marsh, married 31 years, had said on the record that they had considered closing, had actually drawn up the paperwork, had sat at their kitchen table and looked at what they'd built and decided it wasn't worth the fear anymore. And then something changed, Donna Marsh had told the journalist. Someone stood up first. And once one person stood up, we didn't feel alone anymore. The article mentioned the Silver Ridge Diner. It mentioned William Carter without naming his past. He had apparently been clear about that condition, and the journalist had honored it, describing him only as a longtime business owner who had organized the community response and coordinated with law enforcement. It mentioned Claire by her full name, Claire Morgan, 26, who had refused to cooperate with extortion demands on multiple occasions and had been the first person on the highway to file a formal complaint. She had not known she was the first to file. She had assumed someone else had done it before her. "You didn't tell me I was first," she said. "You didn't ask," William said. "William, you would have carried it differently if you'd known," he said simply. "You were already carrying enough." She thought about whether she was angry about that. She decided she wasn't. She decided he was probably right, in the way he was usually right about things that had to do with how people carried weight. Earl Dawson picked up his phone. "Page got shared about 2,000 times since this morning," he said, with the calm of someone reporting weather. "Greta from Dispatch says the sheriff's office has been getting calls. Other businesses in other counties. People asking how they did it." William looked at Earl. "How they did what?" Earl looked back at him. "How regular people organized against something like this." He paused. "Seems like it's not just a Nevada problem." The three of them sat with that for a moment. Then the door opened and two people Claire didn't recognize came in. A man and a woman, 50s, traveling clothes, pulling off the highway. They sat in the window booth and the woman said to Claire, "Is this the place from the article?" Claire looked at them. "We're just a diner," she said. The woman smiled. "That's what the article said too." They ordered breakfast. They tipped 40%. Before they left, the woman pressed Claire's hand the same way the San Francisco woman had pressed it weeks ago and said, "Thank you for not giving up." And then they were gone, back onto the highway, going wherever they were going. Claire stood at the counter and thought about how far a story could travel when it was true. By noon, 6 more tables had come in specifically because of the article. She knew because they said so openly, some of them holding up their phones with the article pulled up as if showing her proof of why they were there. A retired couple from Idaho who had read it on their daughter's Facebook page. Two college students driving cross-country who had seen it shared in a community group. A truck driver from Tennessee who said his wife had texted it to him that morning with the message, "Stop there if you can." He had stopped. He ate the grilled cheese, declared it serious, tipped $15, and said on his way out, "Tell your boss he built something good." He was gone before she could say that the boss was the man refilling the coffee maker behind her. William heard it anyway. He didn't turn around. But she saw his shoulders do something, a small, involuntary shift, the kind that happens when something gets through the careful management of a man who has spent a long time keeping his surface steady. She let it go. Some things you let land in private. The phone rang at 1 in the afternoon. She answered it. A woman's voice, organized and professional, introduced herself as a producer for a regional television news station in Reno. Claire said, "Hold on," set the phone down and went to get William. He came, listened to who it was and said, "Tell them we're a diner, not a news story." She went back to the phone and said, as kindly as she could, "We appreciate the interest, but we're going to keep our focus on the diner. If you'd like to come in for coffee and pie, you're always welcome." There was a pause on the other end. Then the producer laughed, a short, genuine sound. "That's a very good answer," she said. "Are you always this poised?" "I'm a waitress," Claire said. "Poise is the job." The producer laughed again. "Fair enough. Thank you for your time." She hung up. William was watching her from the kitchen doorway. "Good?" he asked. "Good," she said. He nodded and went back to the kitchen. Sandra, refilling the coffee stations on the far end of the counter, said quietly without looking up, "You know there's going to be more of those calls." "Probably," Claire said. "How do you want to handle it?" Claire thought about it. "Same way we handle everything," she said. "Coffee and pee. Keep the door open. Stay honest." Sandra looked at her. Something in her expression was warm and complicated and settled. "When I called you and asked if it was safe," and she said, "and you said yes." "Yeah? How did you know?" Claire considered that honestly. "I didn't know for certain," she said, "but William said so. And I've learned that when William says something is true, it turns out to be true." Sandra nodded slowly. She paused. "That's actually a pretty good reason." "It's the only one I had," Claire said. The afternoon moved through its rhythms. The post-lunch lull, the mid-afternoon handful of travelers, the slow pickup toward dinner. And Claire moved through it the way she always moved through it, present and attentive and paying the kind of attention to people that made them feel like they'd come to somewhere that expected them, even if they'd never been before. At 3:30, the door opened and a man came in that she recognized but had never spoken to directly. Late 50s work-rough hands, the careful posture of someone who had been through something and was still recalibrating. He took off his hat when he came in, which she noticed, and looked around the diner with the specific look of someone who has heard about a place and is now measuring it against what they imagined. He sat at the counter. "You're Frank Delgado," she said. He looked at her. "You're Claire Morgan," he said. "Coffee?" "Please," she poured it. He wrapped both hands around the cup, exactly the way the article had described him doing in the journalist's anecdote, the detail that had apparently hit readers hardest. Frank Delgado, 57 years old, hands that had pumped gas and changed tires and done honest work for 30 years, wrapped around a coffee cup at 6 in the morning, trying to figure out how to protect his daughter. He drank. She let him be. After a minute, he said, "I've been meaning to come in for a while, kept putting it off." He paused. "I'm not entirely sure why I kept putting it off." "You were busy," she offered. He shook his head. "No, I think," he stopped, turned his cup, started again. "I think I felt like I owed you something and I wasn't sure how to say it. And when you feel like you owe someone something and you don't know how to say it, it's easier to just not show up." She leaned against the counter across from him. "You don't owe me anything, Frank." "The article says you went first," he said. "You filed first, before any of us." "I didn't know I was going first," she said. I was angry, and William said to file a complaint, and I filed a complaint." Frank looked at her with the direct, unadorned gaze of a man who had spent a long time looking at things clearly and knew when someone was being honest and when they were being modest and when those were the same thing. "Still counts," he said. "Your name is in that article," she said. "Your story. You agreed to that. That takes something." I was quiet for a moment. "My daughter called me after the article ran," he said. "She's at college in Reno. She called and she said, he stopped. His jaw worked slightly. She said she didn't know about the 6 months, about any of it. I hadn't told her because I didn't want her to be scared. He paused. She was upset that I hadn't told her. And then she said she was proud of me. He looked at his coffee cup. She said she was proud of me. The diner was very quiet for a moment. That's everything, Claire said softly. Yeah, Frank said. His voice had gone rough at the edges the way voices go when emotion is pressing against the inside of words and the words are doing their best. Yeah, it is. He finished his coffee. She refilled it without being asked. He looked up gratefully. The sheriff called me Monday, he said. The DA's office wants me to testify in person. Will you, she asked. He looked at her steadily. Yes, he said. And the way he said it, flat and unqualified, no hesitation, told her that the man who had handed over money for 6 months out of fear was not the man sitting at this counter. Something had shifted in him, not a sudden thing, she thought, not the parking lot moment alone, something that had been building in him since the moment he had picked up a phone and given a statement to a man who had sat down across from him and simply asked. Good, she said. He put on his hat to leave and stopped. He turned around. William Carter, he said. Is he here? In the kitchen, she said. He walked to the kitchen door and pushed it open without knocking, the way people do in diners because the kitchen is not a private space. Carter, he said. William looked up from what he was doing. Frank Delgado stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at him for a moment. Then he said, I don't know exactly who you were before this. I don't need to know. But I know who you are now. He paused. And I want you to know that I see it. William held his gaze. Thank you, Frank, he said. Frank nodded once. What? He turned and walked back through the diner and out the front door, and Claire watched through the window as he got in his truck and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. The way people sit after something has been completed that they didn't realize they needed to complete. Then he drove away. She turned back to the counter and found William standing in the kitchen doorway, watching Frank's truck leave. His hands were at his sides. His face was the calmest she had ever seen it, which was saying something because William Carter's face was always calibrated toward calm. But this was different. This was not the managed calm of a man holding his surface steady. This was the real thing, the calm of someone who has put something down. You okay? She asked. Yeah, he said. You sure? He looked at her. For the first time in a long time, he said, yeah, I'm sure. He went back to the kitchen. She went back to work. And the Silver Ridge Diner turned the corner into its evening hours the way it always had, steady and lit and open. The trial date was set for January. That news arrived through William on a Thursday evening, 2 weeks after the article. He'd gotten a call from the DA's office, brief and official, confirming that Ryan Cole, Tommy Briggs, Dex Rawlings, and 4 other men connected to the operation faced charges that the assistant DA had described, according to William, with a specificity and thoroughness that suggested she had been waiting for a case like this for a while and was not inclined to let it go lightly. Organized extortion, William told Claire that evening. Conspiracy, witness intimidation. The DA added that last one specifically because of the comment Ryan made about Frank's daughter. Claire looked at him. They can charge that? With documentation and testimony, yes, William said. The recording helped significantly. She thought about Ryan Cole, wherever he was tonight, out on bail, presumably, because William had heard through channels that bail had been set and paid. She thought about him sitting somewhere, aware that the testimony of 7 business owners and 1 diner waitress and 1 very thorough automatic phone recording was sitting in a DA's office waiting for January. She did not feel sorry for him. She was not someone who believed in cruelty or punishment for its own sake, but she believed clearly and without apology that certain things had consequences and that those consequences, when they arrived, were not injustice. They were the world correcting itself. Will we have to testify? She asked. Probably, William said. You more than me. You had the most direct contact. She thought about sitting in a courtroom and looking at Ryan Cole across a formal distance and saying under oath what happened, what he said, how he moved, the coffee pot, the $20 bill. Okay, she said. William looked at her. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say? She asked. I'll do it. Yes, I'll be nervous about it between now and January, and I'll probably lose sleep the night before, and I'll be fine on the day because I'll have to be." She shrugged. "Okay." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said with a quiet sincerity that landed solidly, "You are something else, Claire Morgan." She picked up the coffee pot. "I'm a waitress," she said. "I keep telling everybody." He almost smiled. He almost always almost smiled. She had decided long ago that the almost was its own kind of warmth. November moved into December the way Nevada Novembers always did. Suddenly cold. The desert releasing its stored heat overnight like a decision that had been made. The morning sharp and clear. The highway carrying a different quality of traffic as the holidays approached, and people moved between families and obligations in the specific American ritual of being somewhere you came from. The diner was busy, consistently, genuinely busy, in a way that felt different from the fluctuations of before. Not a flood, not the overwhelming novelty rush that sometimes followed a news story, which burned bright and disappeared. Something steadier, people who had read the article and come once and then come back. The produce stand couple, Donna and Gerald Marsh, started having breakfast at Silver Ridge every Friday morning, which Claire learned was a thing they had never done before, had never felt comfortable doing, because the highway had felt for months like something hostile. Now they sat in the corner booth and ordered eggs and talked to each other and to Claire and to William and to whoever happened to be at the adjacent table, the way people do in a place where they feel like they belong. Earl Dawson told Claire one morning that the mood along the highway had changed. "Changed how?" she asked. "People wave," he said. "Used to be you'd drive past the gas station and Frank would be outside and everybody just keep driving. Now people wave." He drank his coffee. "Sounds small." "It's not small," Claire said. "No," Earl agreed, "it's not." The week before Christmas, Stone called. Not William, her, on the number Pete had left on the piece of paper in her apron pocket, which she had transferred to her personal phone because she was not the kind of person who threw away a number like that. She was in the parking lot on her break, breath misting in the cold air, when her phone buzzed with an unknown number and she answered it. "Claire Morgan," the voice said. "Stone Walker." She straightened slightly. "Stone, hi." "I'm not calling about anything urgent," he said immediately, because he apparently understood that unannounced calls from people in his position could land that way. "I'm calling because I heard the article did well, and because I wanted to check in on you personally." "I'm fine," she said. "I know you're fine," he said. "You were fine when we were there, and I suspected you'd still be fine. I'm calling because fine and good are different things, and I wanted to know which one you are." She paused. She was standing in the cold parking lot, and the highway was carrying its winter traffic, and the diner was warm and lit behind her. And she realized as she took actual inventory rather than automatic inventory, genuinely both. "Good," she said. "I'm actually good." "Good," he said, and she could hear in that one word a weight of satisfaction that was not casual. The satisfaction of a man who had been around long enough to know that the distance between fine and good was sometimes the difference between a thing working out and a thing just not falling apart. "Stone," she said. "Yeah. Can I ask you something about William?" A slight pause. "Depends on the question." "When was the last time you saw him, before all this, before the night you came?" "His brother's funeral," Stone said. 12 years ago. "He stayed away that long," she said. "He stayed away that long," Stone confirmed. "And you let him," she said. Not an accusation, a genuine question. Stone was quiet for a moment. "You can't hold on to someone who's decided to go," he said. "Not if you actually care about them. You let them go. You make sure they know the door is open. And you wait." He paused. 12 years is a long wait. But it's not unusual in my experience for the people who feel things the deepest to need the most distance before they can come back to them. Claire thought about William building a diner in the middle of a Nevada desert for a brother who loved diners. 12 years of early mornings and good coffee and the particular daily work of creating a place where people felt held. "He came back," she said. "He came back," Stone said. "And for what it's worth, Claire, you're part of why. Not the whole reason, but a part." He paused. "A man like William doesn't call for a building. He calls for people, and you were worth calling for." She stood in the cold parking lot and felt that land in her the way real things land. Not dramatically, not with sudden tears or a collapse of composure, but quietly and permanently, the way something true settles into the place it's going to live in you from now on. Thank you, she said. Merry Christmas, he said. Tell William I said so. I will, she said. She hung up. She stood outside for another minute in the cold. She breathed in and breathed out. She looked at the highway. Then she went back inside. She told William Stone had called. He looked at her over his coffee cup and said, "What did he say?" "Merry Christmas," she said. William held her gaze for a moment, reading the thing beneath the surface the way he always did, the way he had learned to read things after a lifetime of paying attention to what people meant underneath what they said. "And," he said, "and he said you should come back more often," she said, "to the people, not to the life, to the people." William was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I know." "Are you going to?" she asked. He looked out the window at the highway, at the winter-cold Nevada morning, and the traffic moving through it, and the small light radius of the Silver Ridge Diner burning against it. "Yeah," he said, "I think I am." She nodded. "Good," she said, and meant it. Christmas morning, the diner was closed, which it always was. One of the only 3 days a year William closed the doors: Christmas, Thanksgiving, and the anniversary of Daniel Carter's death in September, which William spent alone and quietly, and which Claire had always respected without asking about, and now understood completely. She spent Christmas with her mother in a small apartment in Elko, which was where her mother had lived for the past 4 years since relocating from California to be closer to Claire. Her mother was 61, sharp-eyed, and had the particular quality of some women of her generation who had worked hard and been given very little and had converted that equation through something that was not quite bitterness and not quite acceptance, but something fiercer than both, into a rock-solid understanding of what mattered. Her name was Patty Morgan, and she was the person who had taught Claire, by example rather than instruction, that you stayed when things got hard because the alternative was never as clean as it looked from where you were standing. They ate together and watched old movies, and her mother asked about the diner and about William and about what happened, and Claire told her all of it, properly, the way she hadn't on the phone when things were still in motion, the full story with all its texture and weight. Her mother listened the way Stone listened, and the way William listened, completely, without filling the spaces with her own reactions before Claire had finished. When Claire was done, Patty Morgan was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He gave you a job when you needed one." "Yes," Claire said, "and you stayed when it was hard." "Yes." "That's a relationship," her mother said. "Not a job. That's a relationship." Claire thought about that. "I know," she said. "And those people who came," her mother shook her head slightly. "All those people who drove all that way." 73, Claire said. 73, her mother repeated, "because one man asked." She was quiet again for a moment. Then, "That's what it's supposed to look like," she said. "That's what people are supposed to do for each other." She looked at Claire directly. "You understand that you're part of that now, that what you did, standing there, not moving, not giving in, you're part of that chain." Donna Marsh said the same thing, Claire said, that once one person stood up, it gets easier for the next person, her mother said. "I know, because I've watched it work the other way my whole life. Watch one person bend and the next one bends faster because it's already the shape of things." She picked up her coffee. "You change the shape." Claire sat with that for a long time. She thought about being 26 years old and working a diner on a Nevada highway and having no particular reason, objectively, to believe that standing up was going to accomplish anything. She thought about the shaking hands and the furious mornings and the compressor that cost $300, and Sandra's red-rimmed eyes and the drive home on the empty highway the night it all started. She thought about the fact that she had stayed anyway, not because she was certain it would work, not because she had some guaranteed knowledge that 73 motorcycles were coming, or that the DA's office would be thorough, or that Frank Delgado's daughter would call him and say she was proud of him. She had stayed because leaving felt wrong in a way that was more fundamental than fear. Because there are things you do not abandon, not because you're sure of the outcome, but because abandoning them would cost you something that fear isn't worth. That was the thing her mother had taught her, the thing the diner had taught her, the thing that night had laid out in unmistakable terms. Some things you protect not because you know you'll win. You protect them because they're worth protecting. January came cold and procedural. The trial date held. Claire received her subpoena in the mail, a formal document that managed, through its very official language, to feel both significant and oddly mundane, the way legal documents always do. She set it on her kitchen table and looked at it for a while and then put it in a folder and went to work. She told William she'd gotten it. He nodded. He'd gotten his too. They didn't make a production of it. They went on with the day. 2 weeks before the trial, something happened that none of them had expected. Tommy Briggs flipped. William told her at opening on a Tuesday morning, the news having come through the DA's office through channels that were not entirely official but were reliable. Tommy Briggs, Ryan Cole's cousin, the man with the scar along his jawline and the temper that ran 6 seconds ahead of his brain, had apparently spent 2 months in the reality of his situation. Third offense, organized crime enhancement, the specific look on his attorney's face when they went through the evidence, and had decided that loyalty to Ryan Cole was a thing with a price and the price had gotten too high. Han had given a complete statement, names, dates, amounts, operations, the specific conversation in which Ryan Cole had told Tommy to make the comment about Frank Delgado's daughter. All of it, documented and signed and delivered to the DA's office on a Monday morning. Claire stood behind the counter and processed this. Does that mean we don't have to testify? It means the case is significantly stronger, William said. You'll likely still be called, but the heaviest lifting Tommy just did. She thought about Tommy Briggs. She had not liked him. She did not suddenly like him, but she understood something about the specific kind of reckoning that must come when you look at the next several years of your life and realize that the people you were loyal to would not lose those years for you. That loyalty, in that world, only flowed one direction until it didn't. Does Ryan know? She asked. He'll know today, William said. She thought about Ryan Cole finding out that the cousin who had been with him since the beginning had put everything in a folder and handed it over. She thought about what that felt like from the inside, the specific structural collapse of a world built on other people's fear when the people stopped being afraid. Good, she said. Good, William agreed. The trial, when it came, was 3 days in January that Claire later remembered less as a continuous event than as a series of specific moments welded together. The drive to the courthouse in Elko with William, both of them mostly quiet, the morning cold and sharp. The waiting room where she sat with a cup of bad courthouse coffee and William's hand rested briefly on her shoulder before he was called to a different room. The moment she walked into the courtroom and found automatically the face she was not supposed to look at and looked at anyway. Ryan Cole sat at the defense table in a suit that looked like it had been bought specifically for this and wore it with the stiff discomfort of a man unaccustomed to the restriction. He looked smaller than she remembered, not physically. He was the same broad-shouldered man who had leaned across her counter and moved her coffee pot to the other side. But something about him had contracted. The particular largeness that intimidation gives a person, the way fear in others makes someone look bigger than they are, was gone. Without that, he was just a man in a suit who had made a series of choices and had arrived at their conclusion. He looked at her when she walked in. She looked back at him. Neither of them looked away first. Neither of them looked away at all, actually. She held his gaze until she reached the witness stand and sat down, and the process of being sworn in required her to look elsewhere. She answered the questions directly and completely. The DA was precise and organized, the questions building on each other in a sequence that Claire recognized from the outside as elegant. Each answer setting up the next question, each confirmed fact adding weight to the one before it. She did not embellish. She did not editorialize. She said what happened and when it happened and who said what and what it felt like to stand behind that counter and hear Ryan Cole tell her that nobody was coming. She said, "He told me I had nobody." She said he was wrong. She said it without drama. She said it the way you say something true when you don't need the truth to be louder than it already is. The defense attorney cross-examined her for about 40 minutes and found, she suspected to his frustration, that there was not a great deal of productive territory to cover. She had not misunderstood anything. She had not exaggerated anything. She had not assumed anything she had not directly witnessed. She answered his questions with the same directness she had given the DA's questions, and when he tried, on 2 occasions, to suggest that she might have misinterpreted Ryan's tone or intent, she said quietly and without heat, "I've worked in diners for 6 years. I know the difference between a customer and someone who isn't there for the food." The defense attorney did not pursue that line of questioning. William testified the following day. She was not in the courtroom for his testimony. The sequestration rules had kept her out, but she heard about it afterward from the DA's assistant, who found her in the waiting room and said, with the carefully managed expression of someone trying not to be unprofessional about a thing they found personally satisfying, "Your employer is very effective on the stand." The verdict came on the afternoon of the third day. Guilty on all counts for Ryan Cole. Guilty on the organized extortion and conspiracy charges for the 4 men tried alongside him. Tommy Briggs had his sentencing deferred pending the cooperation agreement. Dex Rawlings, the man nobody had ever known the last name of, turned out to have a last name, which the court record revealed was Perkins, and turned out to have 2 prior felony convictions in 2 other states, which meant his sentencing guidelines looked considerably less comfortable than anyone else at that table. Claire was sitting in the courthouse hallway when the verdict came through. William was next to her. The DA's assistant came out and told them, and William nodded once slowly, and Claire looked at the ceiling for a moment because she needed to look somewhere that wasn't a person's face. Then she looked back down. "It's done," she said. "It's done," William said. She called her mother from the courthouse parking lot. Patty Morgan picked up on the second ring, and Claire said, "Guilty." And her mother said nothing for a full 3 seconds, and then said, in a voice that was steady, but required work to be steady, "Good girl." She texted Stone, "Guilty on all counts." He responded in under 60 seconds. "Knew it. Coffee's on me next time." She smiled at her phone in the cold parking lot of the Elko County Courthouse and thought that Stone Walker's version of celebrating was probably a very good version. February arrived, and the diner arrived in it the way it had been arriving in months for 12 years, by opening its doors and making the coffee and keeping the lights on. But the February felt different from the Octobers and Novembers and Januaries that had preceded it. The customers who came now came without the half-awareness in the back of their minds that the highway had a shadow on it. That awareness was gone. It had been lifted the way a sound you've stopped hearing only becomes audible in its absence. You didn't realize how much quiet you'd been missing until you had it back. Donna and Gerald Marsh came in every Friday morning without exception. Donna had taken to bringing a small jar of their own honey to put on the cornbread, which Claire took as the highest compliment she had ever received in a professional context. Frank Delgado came in twice a week, usually Tuesday mornings and Saturday evenings. He and William had developed a friendship that operated in the specific male register of not very many words, but continuous presence, which Claire observed and appreciated and did not comment on because some things work better when nobody named them. Sandra came back full-time and brought stability to the morning shift that Claire had not realized she had missed until it returned. Sandra's kids started coming in on Saturday mornings sometimes, taking the corner booth, doing their homework with an efficiency that suggested the homework was finished well before they were willing to admit it so they could justify more time at the diner, which Claire found deeply relatable. Earl Dawson remained the first customer. Most mornings, black coffee, 2 sugars, never admitted to the 2 sugars. Hector the trucker still tipped $5 every time. And one morning in late February, at 6:45 in the morning when the diner was quiet and the coffee was fresh, and the highway carried its ordinary traffic, William came in through the back door the way he always did and poured his coffee and set it on the counter and stood there for a moment before he sat down. "I was looking at something." She followed his gaze and found it resting on the diner. Not one specific thing, but the whole of it. The booths with their duct tape vinyl, the flickering neon sign, the coffee maker that was older than some of the customers. The small, honest, particular thing he had built 12 years ago on a cracked asphalt highway in a Nevada desert for a brother who loved diners and who never got to see what it became. "William," she said. "Yeah. What are you thinking about?" He looked at her. He looked at his coffee cup. He said slowly and carefully, the way he said things that mattered, "I'm thinking about Daniel, my brother." He paused. "I think he would have liked you." She felt that land in the way that real things land, quietly, permanently, in the place where they'll live from now on. Tell me about him, she said. He looked at her with something that was fully open, not the managed quiet of a man holding his surface steady, but the real face underneath it, the one that had built this place and stayed in it and called, after 12 years, the people he loved when the thing he had built needed defending. Kane said, he was funny, much funnier than me. He could make anyone laugh. He paused. He used to say that the best thing you could do in life was find one thing that was worth taking care of and then take care of it every day without making a big deal about it. Claire looked around the diner, at everything it was and everything it had become. Sounds like you listened, she said. I tried, William said. She poured him more coffee. She poured herself a cup. She leaned on the counter across from him, the way she had learned to do in the quiet mornings before the day started, and she said, he was right, about the not making a big deal about the everyday. I know, William said. That's the whole thing, she said. That's actually the whole thing. She looked around the diner. You just show up every day. You keep the light on. You make the coffee. You pay attention to people. She paused. And eventually the people who need it find their way to the light. William looked at her for a long moment. Yeah, he said, that's it exactly. Outside on the highway, the morning traffic moved in its ordinary way. Trucks and cars and the occasional motorcycle, and people going wherever they were going. Some of them stopping and some of them passing, and all of them carrying whatever the day had given them or was about to. And the Silver Ridge Diner stood where it had always stood, in the place on the map between other places, lit and open and attended to by people who had decided, without fanfare and without certainty of outcome, that it was worth protecting. Not because it was grand, not because it was famous or historic or remarkable by any measure that gets written into records, but because it was honest, because it was cared for, because inside it, someone was always paying attention. And because 3 criminals who believed that fear was power had walked through its door one October night and discovered, in the weeks and months that followed, that they had fundamentally misunderstood the equation, that the thing standing between danger and the people you threaten is not always loud or armed or obvious. Sometimes it is a 26-year-old waitress who refuses to move. Sometimes it is a quiet man who makes very good coffee and knows when the moment comes exactly who to call. Sometimes it is 73 people who get on their motorcycles and drive through the night because one of their own finally said he needed them. And needing people is not weakness. It never was. It is the oldest and most necessary form of strength human beings have ever discovered. The Silver Ridge Diner never became famous. It never went on any list. The sign kept flickering on the word open, and the vinyl on the booth stayed duct-taped, and the coffee maker stayed older than it should have been, and William Carter came in through the back door every morning at 6:30 and poured his coffee and sat at the counter. And Claire Morgan showed up at 5:45, same as always, and started the coffee, same as always. And when the first customer of the day came through the door, she looked up and she remembered their order, and she was glad they came. That was the whole story. That was, it turned out, more than enough. End of part 5. End of story.